आजादी के अमृत महोत्सव संगोष्ठी के तीसरे सत्र में आइए प्रवेश करते हैं। On 15th August 1947, we breathed the air of independent India. It would be much later, on 26 January 1950, that the prefix royal would be dropped and the Indian flag would be flown from our warships. Yet, right from 1947, as recounted by Commodore K. Snood, the Indian Navy had been a driver in nation building across the entire spectrum through maritime security, peace operations, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Ladies and gentlemen, this session titled Navy and 75 Years of Nation Building gains major significance today. Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji will chair a high-level open debate on enhancing maritime security, a case for international cooperation, today at 5:30 p.m. That is in about 30 minutes. What an amazing coincidence. This session is moderated by Ambassador Yogendra Kumar, who has had an illustrious journey in the Indian Foreign Service, as well as during the time he represented India in several foreign countries. He has been on the faculty of National Defense College and the Ministry of External Affairs. He handled many multilateral organizations, dialogues in G8, G5, ASEAN, EAS, IBSA, IORA, and so on. He is today a prominent advocate of maritime consciousness and is a renowned scholar in security and foreign policy. The first speaker in the session will be Rear Admiral Krishna Swaminathan, AVSM VSM, Flag Officer Offshore Defense Advisory Group, and to the Government of India. He is a distinguished flag officer and a specialist in communications and electronic warfare. Rear Admiral Swaminathan will speak about the operational legacy of the Indian Navy. Meanwhile, Professor Uttara Sehasrabudhe, the second speaker, she herself is the head of Department of Civics and Politics at the University of Mumbai and is a keynote speaker and professor of international relations. She is a member of the Board of Supervisors, Global India European Training Network, and a member of the International Advisory Board of Global Governance and EU Future Trends and Scenarios, and many other institutions. She would elaborate on humanitarian intervention and relief across the oceans. And the third speaker, Vice Admiral B. Kannan, retired, is a distinguished veteran with over 40 years of naval service, an electronic engineer by profession. He's had varied appointments across technical appointments in the Indian Navy and key roles in indigenization and quality assurance, DRDO. He was also the program director of India's nuclear submarine project for almost 4 years. After retiring in the apex position as chief of material, he has also worked as managing director and CEO of L&T's shipbuilding company. Hence, in this session, he will discuss Atmanirbharta through shipping and shipbuilding. I invite Ambassador Yogendra Kumar to moderate the next session. Ambassador, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Commodore Johnson. Honorable Shri Ajay Bhatt, Minister State for Defense, Admiral Karambir Singh, PVSM, AVSM, ADC, Chief of the Naval Staff, Vice Admiral R. Harikumar, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Naval Command, Rear Admiral Atul Anand, VSM, Flag Officer Commanding Maharashtra Naval Area, Commodore Odakal Johnson, Director and Head of Research, Maritime History Society, esteemed co-panelists, esteemed participants of this digital symposium. I first of all congratulate the organizers for joining our countrymen in celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, commemorating 75 years of our independence. This digital symposium makes its unique contribution to these celebrations by charting the growth of the Indian Navy as a critical dimension of our nation building. The Navy's own journey since independence is emblematic of that of our country as a whole. I also wish to thank the organizers for thinking of me to join these celebrations. I take pride, like the rest of my countrymen, in the Indian Navy's glorious history and find reassurance in its vision of the future. It's a privilege for me to be the moderator of this session, which is an excellent panel to discuss the Navy's own contribution to our nation building and its increasingly important role in our national effort in the shaping of our future. So the scope of this session, in the preceding sessions, our distinguished speakers have traced the connection between the ebbs and flows of our national and maritime might and the historical phases of our national greatness and degradation, be that our material or civilizational richness or our technological prowess. Our freedom fighters were deeply conscious of the loss of this connection and dreamt of making it as robust as possible in their vision of India's future. After all, the dark phase of our colonization began with the naval conquest of India by a distant country. The destruction of Indian industrial and technological skills as a systematic colonial policy is most tragically exemplified in the maritime sphere. Although the earliest national security challenges for our young country arose in the north, especially Pakistan, our national leadership was conscious of the immediate critical tasks of nation building involving the maritime sphere, which have remained abiding even now, if rather transformed in our radically altered geopolitical circumstances. Atmanirbharta cannot be achieved without the national capability to secure the internal environment for it and the external environment to the extent that it might impede the national endeavors for Atmanirbharta. So what are these challenges? What were the objectives at that time and challenges? So we have the strategic equilibrium in the Indian Ocean, which has critical ramifications for national security, given its vast peninsular expanse, island clusters, and close proximity with other littorals. With its geographical location and the proximity to international waterways, the Indian Ocean has attracted the strategic interests of several global powers whose policy towards India has shifted from time to time. While this proximity gives India the capability to project its power so as to shape the regional maritime order, it also opens the scope for other great powers to constrain or manipulate India's capabilities. Shaped by the legacy of the values of its freedom struggle, India's global outlook has been unique in its rejection of bloc politics and infused with a civilizational quality. Hence, Indian independence was welcomed by other Asian and littoral countries, desirous of shedding their own colonial legacies and to build a common Asian future with the revival of these pan-Asian civilizational links. India's rise was also seen as a stabilizing factor for that reason. And here I quote from the reminiscences of Vice Admiral M.P. Awati on his visit to Vietnam in 1958. And I quote, "Everywhere the Mysore went, she was besieged by curious and admiring throngs from littoral East Asia came to see the new Indian Navy. The ship and her ship's company were lionized. No mean distinction for us and for India, which until just 10 years before was in thraldom. When we translated the ships under the wings of a double-headed eagle into Vietnamese through an interpreter, they applauded, just like the Vietnamese. They chorused, 'We are not afraid of anyone or anything. We are going to win,' is what the applauding crowds said. Practically since inception, the Indian Navy has played a significant role in developing national technological and industrial capability. This role has extended to meteorological and oceanographic research. The value of the Indian Navy for coercive diplomatic signaling, as well as for goodwill diplomacy, was recognized very early by national leaders. Both these roles help in the shaping of a maritime order. So in the early years, the hard reality of the global geopolitics and the vision of our national leaders after independence collided early enough. Its modest size after the Royal Indian Navy's division of assets on a 2-to-1 basis between India and Pakistan was evident in the colonial bequest of 4 sloops, 2 frigates, 1 corvette, 4 coastal minesweepers, 1 survey ship, and sundry trawlers. Operational concepts based on the assumption the Royal Navy and other Commonwealth navies coming to India's defense and on the securing of the international slocks were fleshed out in the annual Commonwealth exercises held off the Trincomalee and Singapore. Soon enough, it became evident that the British, then the only naval hardware suppliers and the thought leaders in conceptual terms, looked at Indian requirements through their own strategic perspective, as became painfully evident to the Indian leaders during the first India-Pakistan conflict over Kashmir. How far removed from the geopolitical realities of those days were the capabilities of Indian Navy in its early years, as the country faced a host of national security challenges, even as our internal political consolidation had not yet been completed. Allocated 4% of the defense budget in 1950, it acquired early enough the moniker of being the Cinderella service, becoming the butt of inter-services banter. And I just quote one example. The Defense Committee of the Cabinet, under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Nehru, approved Navy's proposal in 1953. When the service chiefs came out of the cabinet room after the item was approved, the then Army Chief, General Maharaj Rajan Singh Ji, turned to Admiral Pizet. Sir Mark Pizet was the incumbent head of the Indian Navy and said, "Mark, congratulations. That was the greatest naval victory after Trafalgar." So there is a contrast now, which is very evident between those early years and our own times, demonstrating the impressive journey of the Indian Navy and its critical contribution to the accomplishments in nation building in the context of a complex mix of legacy security challenges and the new ones thrown up by the current geopolitical flux. The originally envisaged functions of the Indian Navy remain, albeit almost unrecognizably transformed. Whilst my distinguished co-panelists in this session will take up the different strands of this remarkable journey of the Indian Navy, I propose to very briefly revisit these original functions of the Indian Navy in the current geopolitical setting as they relate to our current national tasks. Our concepts now of strategic equilibrium have become broader, embracing both the hard security and the non-traditional security challenges which are subversive of this equilibrium. The geographical expanse of the strategic equilibrium of concern has also widened considerably since they are commensurate with the growing power and influence of India in the global and regional geopolitics. The first and foremost, of course, is the role of the Indian Navy as the wielder of the second strike capability of our nuclear deterrent. As the second most powerful navy in the Indian Ocean after the US Navy, it is increasingly seen as an instrument of maritime system defense to maintain the existing regional equilibrium. Given our strategic convergences, the US and the other Western, Japanese, and Australian navies consider the role of the Indian Navy to be critical in maintaining this equilibrium. This is being done in various ways, and they'll be talked about in this session. Yet the most crucial aspect of this role is the abjuring of the alliances, but developing robust interoperability capabilities and procedures involving other navies. In addition, the growing international acceptance of the Indo-Pacific as a geopolitical construct has also meant that Indian strategic interests also lie in the maintenance of the existing power equilibrium in the Pacific Ocean as well. In our case, the operational strategies in these two oceans vary as the objectives are different, entailing different sets of capacities, including naval, diplomatic. And this is amply evident in the articulations by our Prime Minister about Sagar that was done on 12th March 2015 and at Shangri-La dialogue on 1st March 2018. And these have been they clearly show as to how our strategic interests vary. Although the Indian Navy constitutes its core, the maritime strength also embraces the Coast Guard and the coastal police in the states. For the sustenance of regional maritime order, mere force projection capability is not enough. A commensurate governance mechanism is necessary for the concerned countries to develop stakes and the shared conviction about capability to address their varying respective strategic challenges. In the Indian Ocean region, the prevailing maritime system is a legacy of the Cold War, underpinned by force balance calculations, and is incapable of handling the current maritime system defense challenges represented by climate change, political fragility in littoral and island states, terrorism and transnational crime, illegal migrations, poor husbanding of the resources of the exclusive economic zones, and ocean biodiversity degradation. The response to these challenges is also shaping the changing role of the Indian Navy as a contributor to nation building. As the lead agency in the development of India's industrial technological capacity, the Indian Navy is also continuing its impressive journey. Yet, there are challenges ahead. The accelerating pace of revolution military affairs and other dual-use technology, especially available in civilian sphere, such as robotics, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and the big data have unleashed a race with profound strategic implications for the smart oceans, and seamless conflation of space, atmosphere, surface, and underwater capabilities, where a high ground has to be occupied so as to play a decisive role in standard setting and in protection of critical areas in our national defense. A sense of direction can be had from the most recent reports about recent Pentagon exercise to predict an adversary's moves days in advance by leveraging the US sensor network, artificial intelligence, and cloud computing resources to achieve what they call decision making superiority. Thus, at a conceptual level, there's considerable scope for the Indian Navy to make its seminal contribution in nation building and in shaping regional and even global geopolitics. Prime Minister's Sagar Shangla articulators and his 2019 Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, mentioning maritime security, HADR, SN, science, technology, etc., lay out that vision in the realization of which the Indian Navy is destined to play an important role. The Indian vision for the Indo-Pacific is therefore unique and is the hallmark of its civilization values. And I end by just mentioning two synchronous developments in our celebrations of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, which symbolize India's emergence as a maritime power in the 21st century. The launch of the indigenous aircraft carrier INS Vikrant in a superior karmic rebirth of its first aircraft carrier, and Prime Minister chairing today the UNSC special session on maritime security, laying out India's vision of it. And now I have the pleasure to invite our first speaker, Rear Admiral Krishna Swaminathan, AVSM, VSM, who's also currently holding the charge of Flag Officer, Defense Advisory Group, and Advisor Offshore Security and Defense to the Government of India. So the floor or the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly delighted and honored to be part of this webinar commemorating 75 years of our independence. I'm particularly privileged to participate in a session that has the very distinguished Ambassador Yogendra Kumar as a moderator and very distinguished co-panelists in Professor Dr. Uttara Sahasrabudhe and Vice Admiral Kannan. The task given to me for this webinar is to discuss the operational legacy of the Indian Navy. So let me start by saying something that's pretty obvious to everybody. This period has been of crucial significance to the Indian Navy, and as the nation has grown by leaps and bounds, so has the Navy. The entire era has been truly transformative and transformational in very many ways. But let me discuss two dimensions of that growth. The first is the growth in the Navy's capability and force structure. From the fledgling service of surface ships that it was in 1947, we added the first element of our naval aviation when we raised a shore-based aviation squadron by commissioning INS Garuda in 1953. We based a squadron of seaplanes there. When we inducted the INS Vikrant in 1961, we became an aircraft carrier navy that had its own integral air defense and the fleet air arm. And when we commissioned the first submarine INS Calvary in 1967, we had become a three-dimensional navy that was centered around an aircraft carrier. It was quite remarkable that within 20 years or thereabouts of our independence, we had already become an aircraft carrier-centered three-dimensional navy. Today's navy as well is a powerful three-dimensional navy centered around an aircraft carrier. But this navy is vastly more large, vastly more capable, and represents vastly more improved technological fighting abilities. The second dimension of the Navy's growth has been in its operational experience. The Navy has deployed in various geographies for a variety of purposes, with different kinds of force mixes and at different times of our history for various kinds of naval operations. It is neither necessary nor possible for me to list out all operations that the Navy has participated in over the last 75 years in a seminar like this. But let me just discuss a few of them that are representative of what the Navy has done, just to give a sense of the breadth and the range of the Navy's operations. In terms of territorial consolidation of the Indian Union, apart from playing a vital role in the unification of the princely state of Junagadh in the later part of 1947, the Navy played a very vital role in the liberation of Goa in November-December 1961. Two episodes of that operation, of course, come to mind immediately. The first is the surrender of the Portuguese ship Albuquerque, which was pursued by naval ships, and the Navy, for the first time, fired a shot in anger, as they say. The ship surrendered, which actually symbolized the capitulation of the Portuguese. But the second episode of a landing on the Anjali Island to liberate the island was an operation of very high daring and high courage, when a small group of naval personnel landed on a boat and fought very fiercely against Portuguese that were entrenched at higher heights and had vantage position to fire from. That, of course, resulted in the capitulation of the Portuguese and the liberation of the Antipope Island. In the 1965 war, the Navy was assigned what was largely a defensive role. But it was really in 1971 that the Navy's offensive spirit and the boldness and audacity was really seen. Much has been written and said about the 1971 war, and we will continue to do that in the year in which we commemorate the 50th anniversary of the war. But apart from the audacity and the boldness and the impact that the Navy created in the war, it must be pointed out that there was remarkable operational innovation that the Navy brought about in the war as well. It wasn't just for the first time that surface-to-surface missiles were used to carry out attacks, but it was also perhaps for the first time that land attacks, ground attacks were carried out from carrier-borne aircraft when the Alizés and Seahawks took off from the deck of INS Vikrant and pounded enemy areas in and around the Chittagong area for the first time ever in this part of the world. We also carried out several amphibious operations to land troops in East Pakistan. We carried out special operations. We helped in the raising of the Mukti Bahini and conducting several very highly effective and successful clandestine operations with them. When the nation received requests from friendly neighbors in the Indian Ocean region for help, the Navy deployed once again its strength, the first time in 1987, when the Indian peacekeeping force was required to land on Sri Lankan coasts. The Navy provided the entire operation seaward support, seaward security, carried out a blockade of several Sri Lankan harbors, carried out active surveillance, and did some very daring special operations, the whole thing under the title of Operation Pavan. In 1988, when there was a coup attempted by a group of mercenaries to dethrone the legitimate government of President Abdul Gayoom in the Maldives, the Indian Armed Forces once again swung in to intervene in strength. It could, of course, be recalled that when the mercenaries saw that they were surrounded by the Indian forces and they tried to flee on a ship called MV Progress Light, the ship was pursued by INS Godavari and INS Betra. We fired once again a shot across the bows of the ship. The ship stopped. The mercenaries, of course, surrendered, and that brought an end to the coup. It could be recalled that this operation happened in the late months of 1988, and in the April 1989 version of the edition of the Time magazine, the cover page actually said Super India, and in the fitness of things, it was the Navy that represented Super India in the form of INS Godavari's picture being on the Time magazine front page. This, of course, was Operation Cactus. It received a lot of international attention and a lot of international acclaim as well. In 1999, in the Kargil operation, the Navy actually did not see combat, but the Navy's assertive deployment in the North Arabian Sea had the potential to threaten the trade of Pakistan, blockade all Pakistani ports, stop all war supplies, and impact the Pakistani economy very, very seriously. It has been recorded that the Navy's deployment of the Makran coast hastened the end of the conflict, and once again, without firing a shot, the Navy was able to fulfill the political strategic objectives that the national leadership had given it. The Navy once again mobilized in strength for Operation Parakram in 2002, and one might recall that this was in response to the Parliament attack in the December of 2001. Once again, without firing a shot, the Navy was able to bring home the operational outcome that it required, change in behavior, and the rest of it. In terms of non-combatant evacuation operations, the Navy has participated in several. There are three of those operations that I'd like to bring out today. The first was Operation Sukoon, where we brought out a lot of expatriate Indians from Lebanon in 2006. The second was Operation Blossom in 2011, where we did the same from Libya. And the third was in 2015 under Operation Rahat, when we could evacuate people of several countries from a war zone in Yemen. We carried out another expatriate evacuation, this time from several Indian Ocean regions in 2020 recently under an operation called Samudra Setu, where we brought home a lot of expatriate Indians amidst a pandemic environment. People who were stricken because of the pandemic and had nowhere to go. I won't dwell too much on HADR because I know that Dr. Uttara Sahasrapade would do exactly that. But let me flag the tsunami of 2004, and I do so because just as the world was waking up to the tsunami and not just trying to understand the word tsunami, but trying to understand the death and devastation that the tsunami had brought about, the Indian Navy had demonstrated great alacrity and a rapid response capability by deploying all over the Indian Ocean. In all, we deployed about 32 ships, 29 aircraft, and about 5,500 personnel to provide help and support not just to the stricken people of both the Indian coast, but indeed to countries in Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, even as far as the east coast of Africa a little later. Yet again, the alacrity with which the Indian Navy deployed surprised the world and brought the Indian Navy a lot of acclaim. In retrospect, of course, the very smooth and effective coordination that was seen during those tsunami operations between among the United States, Australia, Japan, and India germinated the concept of the Quad as it is reported today. One of the important operations the Navy does that is a little less written about but hugely important is what we call shaping a favorable maritime environment in our areas of interest. This the Navy does under the rubric of what we call mission-based deployments, where we establish deterrent presence and we send various kinds of signals, a signaling of our intent, a signaling of our capability, and signaling of our interest to control the maritime environment in areas of our interest. Two of these mission-based deployments that we very regularly do are one in the Gulf of Aden, in which we have a naval ship continuously on station from the October of 2008 on anti-piracy patrol, and the second where we've established near permanent presence in the Persian Gulf region under Operation Sankalp. There again, we have a ship there to make sure that if any contingency should arise, then the Navy is present and can respond swiftly. So if these were, this was just a sample of the operations that the Navy has participated in, but what legacy do all of these operations together leave to us? Ladies and gentlemen, when we speak about the legacy of an individual, we probably refer to some achievement or something that the individual has left behind as a mark. But in historical terms, when we talk of a legacy, we talk about what one period has handed over to another in terms of what it has done. So let me, if you have to sum up the legacy that the Navy of the first 75 years of independence leaves for the future Navy, and we join the dots that each of the operations the Navy has participated in, we probably get a picture. And that picture would say the following things. One, that we have been an operationally effective and a proven Navy that has proven its credentials and credibility all over the world. Two, we hold ourselves to high professional standards. We are a professional Navy and we're very proud of our training, our motivation, and our abilities. Three, we've gained a high amount of credibility and legitimacy all over the world. We collaborate very actively with like-minded navies in the region, and we've built a huge amount of trust, cooperation, and friendship with them. All this because we recognize that maritime security is indeed a shared concept, and a maritime threat in one part of the region could very easily manifest in some other part of the region in no time. Four, the Navy has been willing to assume leadership roles in the Indian Ocean region. One could very easily recall the stellar leading role that the Navy played in the establishment of the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. Five, the Navy has been innovative in its thinking, swift in its response, and decisive in its action. And whenever and wherever the call of the nation has come, the Navy has been there, and more often than not, has brought home the operational outcomes that the nation has desired, largely in very good measure. And six, the Navy of today is a self-assured, self-confident, and highly effective combat force that is ready to take on any responsibility that the nation may give it in pursuit of national interests, national aspirations, or national policy, wherever it may be. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I come to the end of my discussion, and I need to pull all of this legacy into a couple of words, there are several ways in which I could describe it. But let me choose 4 words: agility, adeptness, ability, and acceptability. Let me start with ability first. The Navy has demonstrated over the last 75 years that it's a highly capable force. Both man and machine represent a high national capability. The Navy is adept in what it does. It's a professional force that has time and again established its competence in a range of operations. The Navy is an agile force and has responded rapidly whenever the nation has wanted to. We're deployed in a timely manner, we're quick off the blocks, and have maintained our presence in places that matter at times that matter. And we have developed over the years a high level of acceptability in the region. We not only represent a legitimate country and a legitimate force, but we have forged very strong partnerships of trust, cooperation, collaboration, and interoperability with several navies in the region. And I dare say we aspire to become, and have indeed become, a preferred security partner to all of these. So the 4 elements of legacy that the Navy of the first 75 years leaves the Navy of the future are ability, agility, adeptness, and a high acceptability quotient in the world. These 4 attributes, ladies and gentlemen, are not just important for the Indian Navy to continue contributing to nation building and protect national interests, but indeed are vital elements of a professional maritime force, especially in an era where geopolitics in the region are becoming ever so complicated and maritime security continues to assume center stage in international relations. It has truly been my privilege and honor to participate in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral. May I now invite Professor Uttara Sahasrabudhe, who's already been introduced by Commodore Johnson, to speak on humanitarian intervention and relief across the oceans. Professor, you may kindly make your intervention. Thank you.
Ambassador Yogendra Kumar, the chair of the session, Rear Admiral Swaminathan, Admiral Kannan, the patron and the director, Maritime History Society, and the viewers, a very good afternoon. At the outset, I wish to thank the Maritime History Society for this wonderful opportunity to speak at this event on Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. It is a pleasure and an honor. I'm asked to address the theme, humanitarian assistance and relief across the oceans. Indeed, it is a theme that showcases how the Indian Navy has come of age and how it has reoriented itself in the 21st century. Most of us understand the implications of the strategic geography of post-partition India in terms of its western, northern, and eastern land borders. However, many of us, especially those who do not have any exposure to the maritime domain, do not adequately appreciate the implications and vast opportunities provided to India by its peninsular shape in the south, and also by the island territories, both to the east and the west of the Indian coast. After independence, the Indian Navy has played a key role in many disaster relief operations. Several illustrative stories and anecdotes about this can be found in the annals of the Indian Navy. While the maritime potential of India is known since ancient times, it remained somewhat understated and underasserted during the first quarter century after independence. This began to change from 1971. However, full appreciation of India's maritime potential and its integration with the broad notions of India's national interests, national power, and national security happened only in the 1990s. With the opening up of the Indian economy and rising trade, the maritime domain began to invite more attention in public debates. Concern for security of sea lanes of communication and growing concern over security of energy supplies, besides the threats to national security emerging from the sea, increasingly became the cause of concern in India. The Indian Navy adapted itself to this new reality through various measures, as did the broader Indian foreign policy. This change has become more visible in the 21st century. During the first decade of the 21st century, the Indian Navy published a series of important documents, such as the Indian Maritime Doctrine, first published in 2004, and India's Maritime Military Strategy, first published in 2007. One of the most significant contributions of the Indian Maritime Doctrine is to systematically narrate 4 different roles of the Indian Navy, namely military role, diplomatic role, constabulary role, and benign role. The second, third, and the fourth roles became the focus of the broader role of the Indian Navy in the Indian Ocean region during the 21st century. An early indication of this change was the launch in 2008 of the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, a dialogue among the navies of the region to discuss regional maritime issues and promote friendly relations among the member states. During the 2004-05 tsunami that hit many neighboring Asian countries, the Indian Navy acted swiftly to provide aid to 2 neighboring countries, Maldives and Sri Lanka. 6 naval ships, 1 naval tanker, 4 aircraft, 4 helicopters participated in the mission in Maldives, while 2 naval ships, 2 IL-76 aircraft, 7 helicopters, 1 field ambulance, 9 doctors, and 130 paramedics participated in the mission in Sri Lanka. The Indian Navy undertook relief operations during the floods in Sri Lanka in 2003 as well as in 2016, cyclones in Bangladesh in 2007 and in 2017, cyclones in Myanmar in 2008 and 2017. INS Gadial was sent on a relief mission during the refugee crisis in Bangladesh in the year 2017. In December 2014, the Indian Navy dispatched 2 naval ships to the capital of Maldives, equipped with a reverse osmosis plant to purify water. This operation was carried out upon receiving several distress calls from Maldives when a fire broke out in its largest water treatment plant, leaving about 150,000 residents of Malé without drinking water. Indian Navy provided assistance to mitigate a marine disaster when the Japanese freighter MV Wakashio ran aground on the coral reefs of Mauritius in July 2020. And a few months later, in September 2020, the Indian Navy stepped up disaster relief response to douse the fire on board vessel MT New Diamond that had occurred off the Sri Lankan coast. Indian Navy has also undertaken several relief operations during natural disasters and humanitarian crises within the country. 2 recent events are worth a mention. The Indian Navy carried out a number of search and rescue operations off the coast of Mumbai when the cyclone Taukte struck the coast of India. And 188 people were rescued, 37 bodies were recovered from P305, a barge which sank in the Arabian Sea, 35 nautical miles from Mumbai. Just a few days ago, that is on 30th of July 2021, the Indian Navy responded to a distress call from a fishing boat Silet Mata off the Car Nicobar Island and towed the boat to the harbor for a shelter. Operation Samudra Setu, launched as part of the Vande Bharat mission, brought back 4,000 Indian citizens living in Iran and Maldives. Indian Navy deployed 9 warships as a part of Operation Samudra Setu 2 to bring liquid oxygen and medical equipment from abroad. Oxygen Express mission, launched by the Indian Navy, collected 41 oxygen cylinders from Lakshadweep, brought them to Kochi, filled them, and were delivered back to Lakshadweep Island. The Prime Minister of India, in a speech in March 2015, elaborated the idea of security and growth for all in the region, represented by the acronym SAGAR. This aimed to seek a climate of trust and transparency, respect for international maritime rules and norms by all the countries, sensitivity to each other's interests, peaceful resolution of maritime issues, and increase in maritime cooperation. Recently, in Mission Sagar 2, INS Kiltan delivered humanitarian assistance to the flood-affected people of Cambodia, and Mission Sagar 3, again through INS Kiltan, delivered HADR to the flood-affected people of central Vietnam. The concept of Sagar found its most significant manifestation during the recent COVID pandemic. Under Mission Sagar 1, India reached out to 5 Indian Ocean countries, namely Maldives, Mauritius, Madagascar, Comoros, and Seychelles. INS Kesari delivered 580 tons of food aid and essential medical supplies to all these 5 countries. This narration of expanding HADR role of the Indian Navy points to its increasing footprint in the Indian Ocean region in the diplomatic as well as benign roles. To conclude, it may be said that Indian Navy's humanitarian and relief missions across the oceans have enhanced India's soft power in the region. They have underlined India's role as a responsible maritime power and also India's role as the first responder to natural and humanitarian crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sahasrabudhe. And now I have great pleasure inviting Vice Admiral B. Kannan, retired, to speak on Atmanirbharta through shipbuilding. Admiral, you have the floor. Thank you.
Ambassador Yogendra Kumar, Commodore Johnson, Director of Maritime History Society, my co-panelists, Admiral Swaminathan and Professor Sahasrabudhe, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon once again. At the outset, let me thank Maritime History Society for giving me this opportunity to speak to you on this glorious occasion of our 75th year of independence celebrations about to commence, as well as on a topic that is so close to my heart. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you, which has been structured as shown in the slide. The next 7 slides give the waypoints of the trajectory of the growth of defense shipbuilding in India, as well as the indigenization efforts put in by the Navy during the period 1950 to 2020. The slides have been prepared decade-wise so that you get a feel of both shipbuilding and indigenization efforts, which have gone hand in hand, but mostly controlled by the Indian Navy. And you will get to know, you'll be able to appreciate the chronology, how these events have evolved and how complex they have become as they went from one decade to another. In the end, I would summarize the desirable steps to be taken by Navy to achieve Atmanirbharta and a suggested roadmap till 2030. To start with, let us see the humble beginnings of 1950s. Naval Headquarters commenced design activities of the first naval ship, INS Darshak, the old version of it, with a team of civilian naval architects at Delhi. And after the design was completed, the ship was constructed at Hindustan Shipyard, Vizag later. As regards indigenization, Naval Dockyard Bombay formed a technical cell for locally sourcing spares required for the ex-Royal Indian Naval ships and ex-Royal Naval ships, which were handed over to Indian Navy at the time of independence. Next decade is in the 60s. Navy expanded its vision on both these fronts of shipbuilding and indigenization. MDL, which is a private shipyard, was nationalized in 1960 and was awarded the first defense project to build 4 ships of the Leander class on a build-to-print basis. The design came from UK along with all the equipment, but the ship was built in India. But for the balance 3 ships of this first contract, Navy decided to change the weapons and sensors and bought them from a European firm instead of getting from UK. And all the design changes which are required to fit this newly selected weapon systems and sensors was done by Indian designers, and this was a great achievement at that point of time. Apart from that, Navy's focus indigenization drive in the Leander project resulted in a large number of electrical, engineering, propulsion systems being made in the country. And when the project was scaled up to 6 ships, the industry was really enthused to participate in this program and work with the Navy and MDL. Now let us see what happened in the 70s when the Navy was building on its experience of earlier years. The Navy's design team was developing a modification package for the 5th and 6th Leanders to accommodate a bigger and a heavier ASW helicopter. This was achieved with perfectly on time to meet the timelines of the project. The Navy also finalized a 2-organization approach for new projects, where design would be Navy's responsibility and procurement and production would be with the shipyards. This was in contrast to what the sister service, Coast Guard, adopted in 1977. They decided they will rely on the shipyards for both design and construction. Each approach has got its own plus and minus points, and we'll touch upon this towards the end of this discussion. A major success story in 1970s has been Navy's ability to indigenize submarine batteries. They started with Foxtrot class, and they later extended to EKMs and SSKs, and most recently for Scorpion as well. All these have been accomplished by the Indian industry. Let's go to 1980s. In the 80s, it was time for Navy to further imbibe the knowledge. As the design of new progressed at Naval Headquarters, a fresh challenge emerged. The challenge of interfacing and integrating equipment identified to be procured from diverse countries, different OEMs. But this was promptly overcome by tasking a dedicated group to tackle these challenges in ship design. And this unit which was performing it was made permanent, which is called VESI now, and today it is a part of all ship design activities. In this decade, the Navy also invigorated the indigenization drive for weapons, sensors, hydraulic systems, communication sets, machinery, etc., and they succeeded very well. More importantly, Navy allocated resources for indigenization with manpower and trial efforts. And most notable was when INS Himgiri as a ship was fully allocated for the trials of sonar APSO, which was developed by DRDO and Bharat Electronics. This sonar was completely evaluated, and after that it went for many upgradation, modification, reconfiguration, and became a standard fit for most of the ships which were fitted with sonars, was done by BEL and DRDO together. The 1980s also witnessed a major activity when MDL commenced submarine construction for the first time in India. They started with the SSKs, which was done under TOT during this decade. Now let's look at 90s, when was the last decade of this 20th century. It pertained to innovations and indigenous solutions, and it was an eventful period with both success and failures. Naval Headquarters activated its Submarine Design Bureau to be very closely linked to the nuclear submarine program, which had picked up by then momentum in the design, indigenization, and even construction. The decade also saw some failures, as I mentioned earlier. Firstly, the shipbuilding projects which were progressing at different public sector units suffered delays, repeated delays, time and cost overruns, which was taunted by many as a PSU syndrome. Perhaps this prompted MOD to open up shipbuilding and ship design to private sector, even though at that time in 90s, the policies did not support a very healthy public-private participation. On the indigenous development front, DRDO's Trishul SAM system, which was shore evaluated at the firing range of INS Dronacharya, Kochi, was declared unfit after 15 missile firings, as it did not meet the specifications required by the Navy for this primary defense system. This failure led to Navy importing SAM systems thereafter for its ships, which continues even today. Now let's look at the first decade of the 21st century, which was marked with synergy and cooperation between the user service and the industry. This decade witnessed a large number of defense vessels being built in private shipyards, most of which were for the Coast Guard after the November 2008 terrorist attack at Mumbai. By 2009, INS Arihant, India's first built nuclear submarine, was launched with an indigenization content higher than many of the frontline ships built to date. It may be appropriate to mention project organizations are more result-oriented with indigenization than a directorate at headquarters. There were two other notable impressive success stories during this period. Firstly, it was about indigenous shipbuilding steel, which was developed by SAIL in 2007, and the initial batch was delivered to Cochin Shipyard for the aircraft carrier project, which many of you know is still in progress. The second pertained to development of underwater cables for submarines, which would support both new construction and refits of submarines in India. The last decade of my study has been disappointing for various reasons, as revealed in the caption itself. Firstly, many private shipyards closed down due to lack of orders and poor performance, which resulted in reduction of our nation's capacity to build ships. Secondly, high-value projects like aircraft carrier and Scorpion submarines continue to suffer delays, which I'm very hopeful would be holistically analyzed by Navy as well as by MOD, and they would work out the remedial measures from such aspects recurring again in subsequent decades. What are the likely factors that could have affected the speed of execution and therefore the cost as well, is the two-organization approach of Navy and the constraint it inherently places on design, construction, concurrency, which is very, very vital for timely completion of projects. But the total scoreboard of the number of ships built in India is very impressive. The country's shipyards have built over 325 ships for Navy and Coast Guard put together in the last 7 decades. The details are as shown in the table. By the end of 2019, when we have already built more than 325 ships, MOD decided to bring major policy changes in their defense procurement document, which promises now a healthy level playing field, and the initial results of which are already visible in the new 2021 contracts. Hopefully, the trend will continue, and further, the adversarial result of time cost overruns experienced in earlier decades will get corrected in due course. There are many factors which cause cost overruns, but in today's discussion, we will focus on lowering cost by increasing indigenous content, especially in case of materials, which typically account for nearly 70% of the cost of the ship. This, in fact, is the thrust area of Atmanirbhar policy. Towards this, user needs to revise its strategy, which I have summarized in the next slide. First, let's not be contented with the present percentage of indigenization. It should be, I think it should be around 50% now, but it could be not definitely the higher value officially declared. Secondly, user must undertake a detailed study of imported items, including by OEMs when they supplied equipment. And they should take a recently completed project. I'm suggesting P15 Bravo, which is completed by MDL, and they should take this, study the entire list. Then they should identify items, units, assemblies, equipment itself for indigenization. And the numbers required in each of these shortlisted items should be arrived at after applying standardization norms, both intra-project as well as inter-projects, because there are many more projects coming. A higher scale of production will naturally have lower cost. Thereby, we can bring down the cost of material of the ship. So IHQ should look at this organization models of nuclear submarine program, which have delivered higher indigenization content than shipbuilding projects, and form suitably in structure, organization structure, to take up Atmanirbhar policy. Let me conclude with a roadmap for 2030. First, I would like to say that in the roadmap for 2030, Navy's pioneering efforts in indigenization and design of ships have enabled speedy consolidation of shipbuilding activity in the country. There's no doubt about it. And I think we have covered a lot of ground in the last 7 decades of shipbuilding and ship design and indigenization. But then there is something more to be achieved, especially as per Atmanirbhar policy, also to contain projects completion within the time stipulated. Towards this, I suggest a revised strategy be drawn up, which I discussed in the previous slide, and they should get implemented. Further, Navy and shipyard should induct technologies and construction techniques to realize a higher concurrency in design and construction. I had earlier commented on two-organization approach. That also needs to be looked at while we are finalizing this effort towards getting a higher concurrency level. And lastly, shipyards would need to study Industry 4.0. It's an emerging topic. Many industries have done it. Many private companies are already following it. They should look at Industry 4.0 technologies, adopt those relevant to shipbuilding, and enhance their productivity to enable timely completion of projects. Labor content in shipbuilding is very close to 20%. And if they can bring in some savings there, it will really enable Navy to have ships on time at a lower cost. I wish the Navy and the shipyards the best of success in their endeavors towards Atmanirbhar policy in ship design and in shipbuilding. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Dear friends, in this session, of course, we covered the impressive journey of the Indian Navy in the nation building task. And of course, we looked at it very, reflected upon it in a very constructive, but also have not ignored the difficulty which have been encountered. So in the case of Admiral Swaminathan, of course, he invoked history of the growth of Indian Navy and has actually mentioned that given the complex geopolitics of today, uh, as a self-assured combat force, it needs to continue drawing upon the reserves of agility, adaptability, and adaptness, and of course, to become the preferred security partner of a large number of countries. Professor Sahasrabudhe, of course, very meticulously detailed the nature of Indian Navy's HDR operations as to how complex they are and how prompt they have to be, and how this is actually contributed towards the creation of a conducive maritime order in waters of our interest. And Vice Admiral Karan, of course, with his unparalleled expertise in the subject, has brought out as to what the achievements have been, but also offered a vision for 2030, which advocates how the shipbuilding sector has to be ramped up to 4.0 industrialization phase. And of course, I could only add one more thing here, that the more the capacity is added in this particular industrial sector, then to that extent, our diplomacy becomes even more effective, because that is really now what actually, in fact, the most important instrument of enhancing our influence in regions of our interest. So what is self-evident is that geopolitical uncertainties have deepened, requiring constant policy adjustments by our national leadership. As the nation grows in self-confidence about its abilities, the imperative of Atmanirbharta cannot be overemphasized. This imperative will dictate our international relations, as also the necessity for flexibility in our foreign policy choices. International relations are becoming increasingly transactional, necessitated in no small measure by the pace and unpredictability of events of direct concern to us, not to speak of the black swan events, which are becoming even more frequent due to large number of moving parts in any situation. The two geopolitical constructs, namely the Asia-Pacific and the Indo-Pacific, do not comport well with each other, which now constitutes a major driver of the ongoing geopolitical churn. The maritime fallout of the LAC developments, which have been going on for several years already, is one aspect of that. The Indian Navy is a critical component in the skeletal structure of our national, on our national raw power, around which there will be the musculature of governance would be developed in the maritime space of our strategic interest. This role, consonant with our national values, is both leading and supportive depending upon the requirements. So the constituents of maritime order have changed since the end of the Cold War. This maritime order is not only to be capable of ensuring the rules of the road, but also of responding to natural disasters brought about by climate change and aggravated by institutional dysfunctionalities characteristic of fragile or collapsed states, criminal and terror networks. It also needs to facilitate capacity building for states which are unable to sustainably protect and use the legitimate oceanic resources. This implies that the Indian Navy and other maritime agencies would be tapping into the goodwill of the littoral and island states for partnership in capacity building, experience sharing, and in a common cause as a non-threatening power interested in building a sustainable maritime order. Manifestly, such changing role also entails different sets of operating principles. So with this, I want to thank our distinguished panelists in session 3 for the important contributions in this flagship digital symposium, and I hand over the proceedings to Commodore Johnson. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. What an amazing opportunity where these discussions on the role of the Navy and nation building so deftly held together by Shri Yogendra Kumar, former Ambassador, co-synchronous with the Indian presidency at the Security Council, where the Indian Prime Minister is currently leading the debate as the presidential chair. The Indian Navy remains stood to and as a part of a global initiative representing India's reach and outlook across the oceans. So with that, we conclude the session number 3 on Navy and nation building. But don't go anywhere. The valedictory session will commence in a minute.